Just like roadies at a rock concert, lots of the heavy lifting in synth setups is done by inconspicuous pieces of equipment that at times can hide in plain sight or just do their work behind the scenes when no one is looking. Today, I want to talk to you about 3 hidden heroes and why you might want them in your corner. If you're already a subscriber, huge welcome back. If this is your first time here though,
hi, welcome to the Midlight Synthesis. Let's get started.
The Zoom H6. A few years back, when I started getting serious about making a YouTube channel, I started looking for a very specific piece of gear that I needed to make my Dallas Jam and Talking Head videos. I needed a small field recorder / mixer, preferably battery powered, something that could also provide phantom power for my microphones, as well as take 1/4-inch jacks for my synths to record either in stereo or in mono. Well, thankfully, I didn't even need to look that hard, because if you pay close attention, you'll notice that this scrappy little bastard is basically everywhere in the YouTube landscape. The first thing that I have to comment on is its sheer robustness. The H6 is one of the longest lived pieces of gear I've ever owned, and I have put it through hell and back. I've had it in my backpack, I've dropped it, I've spilled water on it, you name it. It just keeps going on like nothing happened. It even survived getting picked up by my 2-year-old, and the only permanent damage in about 3 years of owning it has been the loss of that little plastic protector, which was intentionally pulled off by said 2-year-old. Apart from being built like a miniature tank, the H6 just oozes functionality. It has 4 hybrid XLR 1/4-inch inputs, which can be used as 4 mono or 2 stereo channels, and also a modular interchangeable head. This mountable accessory can be anything from one of the many microphones to an adapter that fits in 2 more 1/4-inch jacks. A cool little feature that I only noticed about a year after owning it was that the microphone module that it comes with has a built-in stereo mini jack on the side, so you can actually plug in a stereo synth like the Micro Monster, for example, directly in there without needing to buy the input module and still have my other 4 channels available. Each channel has its own gain knob and a pad switch to -20 dB if you need it. A bit of fair criticism here is that the gain knobs have basically no resistance, and they're very easy to move. Basically, each time I handle the thing, I tend to knock over the volume knob on 1 or more channels, so it's something to keep your eye out for. It would have been awesome if they had a bit more resistance and were a bit harder to move around, but that's just how it is. The H6 has a fully colored screen which shows you the levels of your tracks, as well as other information such as phantom power or if the compressor is activated, for example. Also, the screen brightness is enough that you don't struggle when using it outside unless you're in full-on sunlight. Aside from phantom and plug-in power, it also has a low frequency filter and a compressor / limiter built in, as well as multiple recording formats for you to choose from. It can be powered either by USB or by 4 AA batteries. Now, the battery life here is decent, but not mind-blowing exactly. It's not OP1 levels of impressive, but it's not a Sega Game Gear either. For monitoring your audio, you have a headphone out as well as a line out, and it has a built-in speaker that, even though it sounds awful, it can be useful in a pinch. Honestly, if that's all the H6 offered, I'd be pretty satisfied. But this little guy has one more trick up its sleeve that makes it absolutely priceless to me. It can act as an audio interface for your DAW, and a damn good one at that. It's a great solution if you need to take your show on the road or you want to get some recording done directly in your DAW in a tight space outside your studio. As I've said many times before, I am no audio engineer, so I'm not really an expert, but the sound quality is more than enough for my purposes. And most, if not all of the recordings that you've ever heard on this channel over the years have been done on the H6, so you can tell me if it's worth its salt. Suffice it to say, I absolutely love the H6 as it has served me faithfully in countless situations since the very start of this channel and has survived the most harsh of abuses without flinching. Now, speaking of harsh abuse, the next item that is absolutely essential for a synth hoarder but doesn't see the spotlight nearly enough is the gear that helps protect my synths and samplers from said abuse. I'm talking about custom cases for your beloved hardware. In the past, only guitarists and bassists had the luxury of having nice, affordable cases for their gear. Synth cases back then were expensive and really hard to find, and usually they would be a one-size-fits-all type of deal, so good luck trying to find a case that would fit your specific synth or groove box. This all changed when analog cases popped into the scene a few years ago. Now honestly, judging from their Instagram posts, these dudes are just as gassed up as the rest of us are for gear, and I'm beginning to suspect that their business might be just a front for them to get their hands on the hottest groove boxes and synths without having to give their spouses too many explanations. Coincidentally, since that is the main reason that this YouTube channel exists, I completely empathize with their costs. Anyway, I've owned a ton of analog cases over the years. Hell, if you go back to my first ever talking head video around 3 years ago, you can actually see one of my first analog cases right next to the OP1. That's why when Greg from Analog Cases reached out to me and offered to sponsor a video, I said yes immediately. I've owned a ton of analog cases, and I can honestly speak to the high quality of their build, as well as the smart designs that these people offer. Remember my MPC Live 2 that got stolen a while back? Well, it was wearing a beautiful analog hard case with it. So even if the robber chucked it violently into a trunk somewhere, I'm sure that that MPC got to wherever it was going safely. In a little over a year of taking it with me to a bunch of places, the case remained in top condition throughout. The MPC fit snugly inside the foam, and the foam itself never got soft or started to wear out. The case itself was actually surprisingly lightweight for how sturdy it was, which was a huge plus considering that the MPC is a pretty beefy beast by itself. That OP1 case that I talked about earlier, well, I traveled with it everywhere inside my backpack to work and to pretty much every vacation I had in a span of almost 2 years, and it never gave me any issues besides maybe the logo getting a bit scratched. And I think that maybe that's the highest praise that I can give analog cases, is that I've never actually thrown one away. They've just been sold with the gear that they were holding. The thing about cases in general for your gear is that you usually think that they only serve a purpose if you're doing lots of live gigging or traveling around. Well, let me tell you that I do almost none of either, and still I find that having cases is extremely useful because they're a great way to store your synths and stack them up without scratching them or leaving them exposed to dust. I want to give a special mention to the case that houses my Strega and my Okos, just because they fit ever so snugly, and you get this little nook that you can store some patch cables in. And also that blue foam is just really cool. Anyway, huge thanks to Analog Cases for sponsoring today's video. I highly recommend you check them out. Now, before going into that last category of essential gear that you rarely notice, I just wanted to give an honorary shout out to cable adapters, be it 1/4 inch to 8-inch jacks or 5-pin MIDI to TRS. These things are a must-have, and I do suggest you stock up on a few of them because they always come in handy. Finally, the last but most definitely not the least of my backstage lifesavers are my MyVolts ripcords. I originally bought a few of these so I could use my Electron gear and my SP404 in my car on my lunch break without worrying about batteries. But they have been used in so many different scenarios apart from my original purpose that I just have to recommend you grab a couple yourself. I've used them to power up gear in airplanes and hotels abroad where I didn't have outlet adapters or not enough electrical outlets, but I did have access to USB power. And they've been extremely useful in powering up other gear such as guitar effects pedals, my camera monitor, or even the robotic camera slider that I use for B-roll. Now those last two I mentioned run on rechargeable batteries, and since I'm very cheap, I bought the least expensive ones, and they tend to last as much as a fart in a straw basket. The ripcords bypass the need for battery power, so I can use these devices even when my batteries die, which is pretty much all the time. My only gripe with them is that when I ordered them, they took forever to get here. Now, I do suspect that that might be a problem with the British Postal Service and not necessarily MyVolts themselves. Anyway, those are some of my essential backstage buddies. What about you? What are your favorite undercover pieces that are keeping your entire setup together? Let me know in the comments. I'm always on the lookout for cool new things to discover. As always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video useful or at least entertaining. Have a great week. See you next time.